Hello, my name is Johnny Dunfee, and welcome to my strategy analysis for the Back Bay battery simulation. And so, jumping right in, I believe that this simulation takes place in the year 3 out of 10 for this company, and you're jumping into year 3. Things aren't going badly, but you have to decide what to do to help navigate and to grow profits and to grow revenues. And so to start out in my first few years, my strategy was to mainly focus on AGM battery investment, and then about years 3 or 4 in, I would pivot into the supercharged battery due to the increase in the uninterruptible power systems, and then in the latest stages, I would invest in the supercharger price. And so we'll break this down a little bit further as to why I did that in later slides, but that is the general process that I use. And so moving right on, any discussion of strategy, we want to be linking to our balance scorecard. And so I'm just going to run through these quickly, but what are some of the main ways that each balance scorecard domain relates? First, in the financial, the case tells us that the price for the AGM batteries, that's our main product, is very elastic. Um, we can maybe increase price some, but doing so to an extreme amount is going to lose us customers quickly. And then the second financial aspect that we see kind of through just diving into the data later on, but that the margins on the supercharged batteries are very poor. I think that early on they're $25 of variable costs, and we were only selling them for $20. So that means for every battery we're selling, we're losing $5. And so those are some of the financial aspects. The customer aspects, we have two main customers. Marine customers are listed and discussed in the case, but the market for those are smaller, and they honestly had more demanding battery requirements. And so my strategy did not involve targeting this market. The solar customers, they need high energy density, and they're very price motivated. And so our batteries pretty well meet this. We'll talk in a few slides about how we kind of failed to meet the changing market of solar, but mostly those are the two main, is price and energy density. And then the UPS, that's uninterruptible power systems customers, have some different needs as well. They needed a fast battery recharge time, which is the supercharged batteries have that capability. Um, and they're price sensitive, but it doesn't seem like as price sensitive as the solar customers. It's also important to note, we'll talk about this in a moment, but this market just expands greatly during the time frame of this case. Moving quickly on the internal business, our company has a policy that the R&D department is related directly to the um, revenues, not to the profits, not to any other metric, but just simply to the revenues. And I believe that number was 2 to 3% of the revenues goes to R&D. And then one of our R&D options is simply process improvement, which is a fancy way of saying for this case, is cheaper variable costs. We can invest into lowering the production amounts of our products. And then finally, we have learning and growth. Um, some of the learning and growth areas that we can work on are the AGM power density issues and the supercharged recharge time. You see these relate directly kind of to our customer needs. Um, those are the main needs of our customers' products. Now that we've looked at the balance scorecard, let's take a brief glance at our timeline of sales here. We see right in year 3 that the solar market just takes a big hit. I think that in the news, the news comes back and the solar market is shifted towards batteries that are much more energy dense. I had played through a few times and tried to counteract this with some major R&D investments into energy density in the first few years that you're making the decisions, but you can't seem to counteract whatever this alternative product that's hit the market that is taking away some of your sales there. And then at the same time, as you look at the back half of the supercapacitor sales, um, the uninterruptible power systems, just it skyrockets from year 5 onward. And so really what my strategy revolved around early on is let's build revenue, let's get R&D funds in these first few years with the solar sales, and then as it takes a hit, let's improve our supercapacitor product so that we're ready for this entire market shift. And so let's move on to the next slide. And we are going to see this the uninterruptible power systems customer snapshot. Just another look at the data reinforcing this. When we start, we can sell a little bit under 60 million units around year 5. This is up to about 100 million units. And then by year 10, the market size is up to almost 240 million units. And so that's a higher value product, a higher revenue generating product that they're really targeting is the supercapacitor batteries. And so we want to try and increase this market share. You see in our installed base in this scenario that I ran through, we actually get up to having 60 out of the 250-ish million products. So we're controlling about a quarter of the market, give or take. And so let's look a little bit more in depth, just kind of at the AGM battery margins strategy. Um, these AGM battery margins, we can really take advantage of the healthy profit margin. Just to look at some of the data that helped me use this strategy, the AGM starting variable costs for the battery was only $6.50, and we had been selling it at $10. And so the thing I did early on is I dropped the price of this. Let's lose a little bit of profit to boost the revenues, knowing that these solar suppliers are putting pressure on us for cost, and they're putting pressure that they're looking into other products. And so we really need to invest into other areas of the business because we're so dependent on the solar batteries. Um, as a reminder, looking at point 2, R&D is linked to our total revenue, and so we need to just skyrocket that revenue early on to start some of these R&D projects that'll be super key later in. And so what what I did is I cut the price of the AGM batteries, and then I started by heavily investing in cutting the production costs of those AGM variable costs. I believe I was down to be able to get them down to about 5.25 per, and then selling them at around $9 per. So we cut the price, but over the course of 3 or 4 years, we're able to hold those sales steady um, with about the same profit margin. And then looking at bullet point 3, what we know when we're expecting that solar power decrease is let's search for a blue ocean. And so you're getting a report every year when you make those decisions. The UPS market has increased. The UPS market has increased. And so I think they were increasing 25 to 35% every year. And then they really upticked in year 5. And the thing that the case also let you know is that those UPS providers are really wanting high recharge times. So the first few years, let's really boost revenue. Let's cut the price of these AGM batteries to just increase sales. Let's grab as much revenue as we can. Let's put that money into, a really solid, stable project of AGM batteries, and then let's take that money. Let's search for a blue ocean of the UPS market, and excuse me, let's look for another provider that can really stabilize our business outside of just the solar market. Let's move on to just take a quick look at the solar, moving away from the solar and shifting to the supercapacitor products. So the supercapacitor products, early on, we had talked about early, the margins were awful. The margins started where the variable costs were $25 per unit. Um, and so once we secure those AGM sales, we took that money and we started investing it into two things for the supercapacitor. Looking at bullet point 4, the cost savings, we were able to get from 25 units down to, by year 10, $11.80 per unit. So that's a major decrease. And then the other thing that the supercapacitor UPS customers, they're wanting this decreased recharge time. And so we spent the money we earned from the AGM solar, investing it back into the recharge time. And this was super successful, as you saw towards the end. We're making 40 to 50% profit on both products. Um, And then we also, with that exploding market, decreased the price around year 8 to just secure even more sales now that our margins were more healthy. Um, and the product was what the consumers wanted. And so we closed this case with 2 successful products, um, just through looking at the data, seeing where our margins were poor, seeing what the consumers wanted, and investing in that in a way that made sense for the company to be stable. We were able to close with about $480 million in profit in the 10-year window that you were the president of this company, and I believe that it was an overall success.